What's the password? Welcome to the Game Master's Speakeasy. Brought to you by the record button.
Hello and welcome to the Game Master's Speakeasy. My name is Cody.
And I'm Lance.
And I welcome you to come in off the street, come into the warmth of the ever-burning hearth.
Coming out of the rain today.
Yeah, definitely coming in out of the rain today, at least where we live. And coming out of the rain and the thunder, the precipitation, and grab an age-appropriate drink up at the bar where today's bartender, Anya, is serving. Today, we are drinking a wonderful, delicious stout that we will talk about. We're going to answer yet another email question. However, also another email question from a listener who is in one of our gaming groups.
It's okay, it's a valid question.
It's a valid question from a valid listener. But it is pretty good. I like the question.
Valid-ish listener.
Oh, you've been called out. All right. We've got a couple pieces of news to talk about. So grab a chair, get warmed up, and get relaxed because we want you to be, in a good state of mind while we sit here and talk about one of my favorite things, tabletop role-playing games, for at least 40 minutes. Probably 40 minutes.
40-ish minutes.
40-ish minutes of one of my favorite things. What about you, Lance? Do you like tabletop RPGs?
I mean, I keep doing it, so I must.
I mean, a lot of people keep doing their jobs.
But I'm making one. I'm playing several of them. Yeah, no, I'm a fan. I do like the tabletops.
Speaking of making one, let's talk about the Titans. Well, they're not Titans. Wizards of the Coast is a Titan, but a very powerful competitor that I think is making quality products one right after another. Free League Publishing.
Free League.
Yes, we have talked before. Oh, by the way, I gave you Morkborg. Have you had any chance to read through it yet?
Yeah, I've read through a little bit of it. The game, by design, I think the book is just chaotic because all the little writings in there are just all over the place.
Yeah, it's like a death metal album.
Yeah, but I do enjoy it. It is probably one of the most interesting tabletop books that I've read, just because of the way that it's laid out and stuff like that.
And all the artwork. And
yeah, I haven't finished it, but I mean, as a big metal fan to begin with, I really like the vibe that game puts off.
Oh, and it definitely puts out a very metal vibe. The same people that made Morkborg were the ones, I believe we have talked about it before. There was going to be a Kickstarter for an officially licensed Blade Runner tabletop RPG.
We have talked about
Yes.
that. Where's that? How's that coming along?
The Kickstarter has a little over 2 weeks left to go at the time of this recording, and they've already raised over $1.2 million.
Nice.
Yeah, so this is joining the ranks of very, very profitable, at least, or very well-funded campaigns for tabletop games.
Well, and I have a soft spot for dystopian cyberpunk to begin with, so that's
Blade Runner. The director's cut of Blade Runner and then Blade Runner 2049 are among some of my favorite movies.
yeah,
so
they're good. They're very good.
I'm very stoked to check this out. I am on the fence about funding the Kickstarter, but I just in general, I don't fund a lot of Kickstarters. A lot of the time I can wait for the product to come out.
I mean, it sounds like they're not hard up for money, so you probably don't need to fund the Kickstarter to make it happen. It sounds like they've gotten plenty of money, so I mean, you'll eventually get around to paying them when you buy the book.
Yeah, and
They'll get their pound of flesh, I promise. they just might not get it in terms of pre-order.
No, I mean, it really comes up with when they've got goodies that are going to be only available to Kickstarter people, or people that fund the Kickstarter. But I mean, the amount of money that they ask for, it's always funny to me when companies are like, oh, I think the translation, or not translation, the conversion from, I actually don't know what SEK. I think that's, what is that? Swedish? The Swedish money? I don't know what they're called, but Kickstarter automatically converts it. So the goal of $10,049 has been completely trounced.
Oh yeah, no, that's
as of this second, it's 1.256 million.
Yeah, they're doing fine.
They're doing great. I think this game will be. Sorry, their tag thing says funded in 3 minutes.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're working with an IP that people are familiar with, something that I think translates well into a tabletop game. And I think that even the Blade Runner IP aside, I think that cyberpunk is generally a pretty well liked genre.
I think so too. And it's I looked it up. It's the Swedish krona.
Okay, yeah, no, Krona sounds familiar.
Yep, the Swedish krona. And what else? What type of character would you make? Would you? Because I assume that you don't have to be a Blade Runner in the same way that in the Avatar RPG you could make a merchant or something. Like, would you want to be a capital B Blade Runner?
I mean, not necessarily. I would really depend on the campaign. I like cyberware. I am, in a lot of ways, a fan of transhumanism. I think in the world of reality, the concept scares me a little bit, but in the world of like fiction, I love it.
It's an awesome trope.
Yeah, I mean, I want somebody to scoop out my eyeballs and put metal ones in their place.
Dude, me too. I've got my eyes hurt today. I could use some cyborg eyes.
Well, I
today.
mean, I don't have perfect eyesight, and I'm almost wondering if they could correct color vision with that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So
theoretically,
because
if you
I
had
am red
cyber
green.
eyes-
I'm red green colorblind, so if you could scoop my eyes out, and I don't have 20/20 vision.
Yeah, so you and I see, well, not you, the audience, where you, most of the audience, and I see a wonderful field of green. Lance sees like a brown, right?
Yeah, mostly, yeah.
Yeah,
I have
so-
a hard time telling the difference between greens, browns, and stuff like that. So.
Which it'd be really cool if that could be fixed,
yeah, I mean,
right?
just scoop it out with an ice cream scoop, slap some
God, that's terrible.
Slap some mechanical ones in there, and let's go.
I'm sure that's the official procedure. They say that right in the medical manual. Grab yourself an ice cream soup and get really inside that orbital cavity.
The dystopian corporate advertisement from the universe.
Oh yeah,
is just
the commercial is
yeah,
that cute anime girl with an ice cream scoop.
with an ice cream scoop and like cyber eyes in her other hand.
Oh, gross. All right. So Warhammer
it.
Fest is currently going on right now, where they usually announce a bunch of stuff, and that means new models. Even if you don't play Warhammer, there are Warhammer RPGs, and there is both a sci-fi setting called Warhammer 40,000 or 40K, and there's two fantasy ones. There's Warhammer, the Old World, and then or just Warhammer Fantasy Battles or Warhammer Fantasy. All of those are basically the same thing. And then Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Regardless of your tabletop role-playing setting that you're currently playing in, and don't get me wrong, sometimes the price points for Games Workshop models can be a little wonky, but the quality of their models, I would say, is indisputable. And I have always wanted to paint a Skaven Deathmaster, which is a Ratman assassin guy.
Okay.
And they have just announced a new Skaven Deathmaster model, and I'm going to show it to you right here. Look at that.
Okay.
I like the way that he is perched up there holding a what is that, like a shuriken or a throwing glaive with poison oozing off of it.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty neat model. I mean, Games Workshop puts out great models, but as somebody who is an avid 3D printer,
Oh yeah.
I have issues with what they charge for that stuff. Because, I mean, realistically, and I'm not advocating for piracy, but it is one of those things where the cost of a 3D scanner is going to get cheap enough
Eventually.
that, because, I mean, that is kind of the missing link in being able to just kind of take these models and have somebody just post them all online, is that the 3D scanners are not that widely available. But
See, I wanted to make a case because they do have a very stellar team of artists, right? And if you're not paying the company, then these artists aren't getting paid.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm not advocating for piracy. What I think is, and this is just me personally, that Games Workshop is eventually going to have to start selling these as STLs.
I agree.
Instead of
They'd get more of my money if they did that.
well, and that's the thing. I think that there's going to be a black market force correction of it. Eventually, you're going to get. I mean, you see them now. You can get on certain 3D print sites, and they won't call them Space Marines. They'll call them something else, but the model is clearly a Space Marine, a Warhammer 40K Space Marine, and you can just download the STL and 3D print it. Now, I am of the opinion that I would rather buy the official STLs from Games Workshop.
Yeah, because the sculpts are awesome.
100% of the
They're
time.
awesome. Most of the sculpts are so cool.
Well, and I mean, it's not like I haven't gone and paid $80 for an STL set that had a whole ton of different STLs. I mean, I don't play Warhammer, but I'm familiar with it. I like the models, and if I did if I did play it, I would be happy to pay Games Workshop for the STLs.
It's a very kind of wonky situation because you can get like a box of 2 HQs or like lieutenants or commander types. There's this, and they're not necessarily part of any army, but you look at a box of these like 2 cool looking commander guys. Like there's a guy and a girl, kind of like witch hunter type characters, and I think they're part of like Warcry or one of the skirmish games or something. And it's like their box is somewhere near $40 or $50 for 2 models at human size scale, 28, 32 millimeter, and that's like about $50. Or I can go get like 20 skeletons for $50. That's like, what's the deal there?
Well,
right?
I mean,
it's like there's a lot more plastic in the skeleton box.
You just bought a big terrain pack for like anything that we could hope for. Was $120, give or take, $130?
Oh yeah.
For like all this terrain.
A pack of STLs.
Yeah, pack of STLs, not actually printed minis. But I mean, if you take that and then you add into it the cost of operating a resin printer, it's still light years cheaper than buying anything that like Games Workshop puts out.
For their official terrain.
Yeah, I really want to see Games Workshop finally kind of crack and have to start selling these STL files to people.
I'd buy it.
So would I. I mean, that's the thing. If I don't even play it, I would paint it just to have a bunch of cool model Space Marines laying around my nerd cave.
Yeah.
Like, I would do that because I am a fan of the lore. I am a fan of, like, Warhammer 40K is one of my favorite things.
You've read so many of the books. You've listened to podcasts.
I went through I have, like, the physical copies of almost every book in the entire Horus Heresy series. And then I just recently went through and bought most of them in audiobook just so I could listen to them when I'm driving.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like I have no problem giving Games Workshop money.
Right.
I want them to sell me a specific product that they don't want to offer, and I think the reason they don't want to offer it is because they think they're going to keep making more money on these models.
And you know what? If they can, good for them. But
eventually, that's not going to be a tenable business model.
That's your prediction.
That's anyway. My prediction is they will eventually be forced to start selling these STLs.
Well, when the time comes, maybe they will, and hopefully the STLs will be a lot more affordable than the actual models.
I think they would have to be.
Imagine that. Imagine they start selling the STLs, but they're only like 20% cheaper. Oof. That would get some backlash.
I mean, they could sell each like individual minis STL for a couple of bucks and they'd make a killing.
I think so.
Because I mean, I would.
And 3D printing is its own separate hobby. Like, not everyone wants to 3D print. It can be a hassle sometimes.
There would still be people that would most definitely buy the actual, pre-printed or the mold, injection mold miniatures that they have.
Because I will say, no matter how good, like, I don't have a 4K printer. I have a 2K 3D printer. And I don't know, maybe the 8K ones that are coming out now can do it, but like, I still see the print lines on no matter how, so when you get to paint on that injection mold plastic that with no print lines, it feels pretty nice.
No, for sure. But I mean, it's the kind of cost trade-off of it.
It's a cost to effect ratio.
Yeah, I can print out a crap ton of miniatures with my 3D printer. And while the quality might not be quite as high as it's going to be, getting the injection molded stuff, it's the fact that I when I instead of going out and buying 30 Space Marines, I can go buy the STLs and print 30 Space Marines, and the cost is going to be considerably cheaper.
Yeah, or you can print bits, which would be nice.
Yeah.
All right. Now that we've talked about Games Workshop in the news section for quite a while, in summary, the Warhammer Fest has happened, and regardless of whether you play sci-fi or fantasy, there are some cool models out that are on the horizon. I really want to paint one of these new Chaos Space Marines are finally getting some love. They have these dark commune dudes. Like, look at this guy with a great sword.
Cultist looking dudes?
Yeah, they're like, head cultists. Is the feeling I get. But very important, Chaos Space Marines are finally getting a second wound on their models.
I don't know what that means.
It means they're going to be a lot more durable. Basically, like, ever since Primaris Space Marines were a thing, the Space Marines have had 2 health points to Chaos Space Marines 1 health point. Which is not, so now they're going to feel beefier on the tabletop. for each individual model. But yeah, check those models out. If for some reason you've never heard of Games Workshop or Warhammer, check out the models. They are really sweet models. You can buy like an individual commander that might fit your D&D Heroes theme, and as long as they fit on a relatively appropriately sized base, you can put them on the grid if you're playing a grid-based combat for your D&D game.
Chaos Gate came out this week too.
That's true. That's a Warhammer PC game that is a turn-based, based on a tabletop game.
It's supposed to be like
it's relevant.
XCOM with Grey Knights.
Yeah, essentially.
I'm watching it. I'm keeping an interest eye.
Yeah. Wait for a Steam sale, but I'll probably get it. What have you done recently in RPGs?
Well, let's see. We've done a little bit of Call of Cthulhu stuff. We're slowly maybe unraveling the mystery of what's going on in Arkham with the creepy. I guess Dan's scientist finally actually saw the thing, which had kind of a lupine face with like sharkish skin. And, and a knife arm and a peg.
Reflective rubbery skin.
Yeah, and a knife arm and a peg leg, and that thing tried to chase him down and then punched a hole in his truck with its knife hand. So we did that.
And it was by virtue of the dice that character survived
Yeah,
that chase.
he got very close to getting killed, and his sanity has suffered a little bit from it, I think, too.
Which is what happens in Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, which is pretty normal for Call of Cthulhu. And then we played a little bit of our Pathfinder campaign, Pathfinder with Forgotten Realms, and we went down to an underwater city.
Yeah. Off the Sword Coast, down by the Nelanther Isles.
Yep, and we negotiated with an angry kraken, or I negotiated with an angry kraken.
Yeah, you negotiated with an angry kraken.
He is apparently looking for a ritual that will decurse an artifact. And so now I've got to get that from him. So he will leave and give me the thing that I need in order to continue our quest.
I'm curious, now that I have you here and we're talking about it, can you describe how your character feels when you come across powerful beings like that? Now that because you guys are high level. You guys are like level 16, right? So you guys come across a big being like a kraken, like what's the mindset that your character is in when you approach a imposing being like that, given that your characters are, because you're not playing level 1 characters.
Well,
if you're playing a level 1 character and you come across any big creature, you're scared, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the thing is with me, and I like this mystery because I haven't dug into the stat blocks of a lot of these things, mostly because I haven't done really a lot of game mastering for Pathfinder. I don't know how powerful he is. So what I don't know is, would it have been possible for our party to go down there and steamroll him? I feel like you made it pretty clear we probably shouldn't do that because he had a whole lot of dudes. And I thought action economy is definitely not in our favor here.
But even if you steamroll the Kraken, the citizenry of the city will suffer, right?
There were a lot of roadblocks in place to keep us from picking a fight with the Kraken. But I mean, moreover than that, apparently
he's got a whole section of this Triton city.
Yeah, he's an occupying force in a section of the Triton city. They have all the Tritons in that section of the city on lockdown, and then he is, of course, a giant Kraken with great magical power. I prefer negotiating in a situation like that. I go into these scenarios, and maybe it's because I'm typically more cautious in these kind of things. Like my character specifically is more cautious. My assumption was, even if I was willing to sacrifice all the Tritons in the city to get what I wanted, we still probably weren't going to survive the encounter.
Right.
Which left us in a position where negotiation.
I guess you don't know.
I don't know, but it was fairly heavily implied. So that left me in a position where negotiation was the answer, which the good news is Aram is good at negotiation, and I enjoy doing it. I like playing a character that can do a little bit of talking. So I basically just talked to the Kraken, found out what he wanted, and said, okay, well, if I can get you what you want, will you evacuate the city and give me the key? The key being a golden ship that we need to unlock this pirate treasure hoard for the Pirate Queen that we're working for. If you guys have been listening to the past episode, you should have some idea what I'm talking about. And if not, go back and listen to it. So, I mean, I went into it with a mentality that I don't know where the Kraken landed on my danger radar, but I knew that the combined Kraken cult plus the Kraken was not going to be fun. So I don't think that I went into it with a sense of dread, because we did know that the other envoys had simply been sent away as opposed to being murdered. So I didn't feel like active hostility was going to be
the first answer.
the first answer. But then again, we also have some characters in our party that don't know how to talk to other beings and people that may or may not eventually get us into combat when we don't want to. So
And you're smiling as you say that, which means that it's an endearing character trait despite the problems that it brings up.
yeah, no, as Dan often says, I don't create problems, I create adventures. And while I'm not talking about Dan in this particular incident,
That's a quote from him.
that is Dan's quote.
That applies to the wizard of the party.
He makes a lot of wacky characters that go off, split the party, and do their own things. And Dan has always said, I don't make problems, I make adventures. And this is one of those scenarios where we have other characters in the party that tend to say things or do things that will agitate beings that could be a threat to us, when, just shutting up probably helps. But, as Cody said, I'm smiling because it does tend to create adventures to see those things happen. So, I guess at this point now what we're trying to do is we're tapping all of our contacts to see if we can find anybody that can get us this ritual for this Kraken, so we can get this key and get out of here and leave the Triton City.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun to have a non-combat encounter with a powerful being, I feel like.
Oh yeah, we murder plenty of things.
I personally, I will pull the screen away for your sake as my co-host, but when I was approaching this situation, I approached this entire scenario with, the redemption. I'm trying to redeem myself for the Crystal Rose Garden incident, kind of.
Well,
in which Aram was negotiating with a powerful being, and it was one of my biggest mistakes as a game master. So now here you've got I'm kind of trying to provide an opportunity where he can do what he wanted to do in the first place.
And I mean, I found it to be very satisfying. The thing seemed to take, I wouldn't say a liking to me, but at least was willing to have a discussion. He seemed to not believe me when I told him I would be able to find this ritual for him, so I'm hoping I can come through. But yeah, I mean, that's the plan here, is simply to get him to take the ritual and give me what I need and leave. So the Tritons can get back to whatever they were doing before this clown showed up.
Yeah. And I am eager to see where that goes in, not the next session. Next session's Call of Cthulhu, but
we got a couple of weeks before we...
And I feel like everyone, at least maybe because it's the shiny new car, possibly, but everyone's more into Call of Cthulhu right now.
I mean, I could go either way. I like them both for very different reasons, because they are very different games. So for me, it's like Call of Cthulhu. I like it because we kind of we turn the lights way down.
It's like scratching a different itch.
Yeah,
it's like, Pathfinder, my nose is itchy, and then you go to Call of Cthulhu, and you've got a deep crevice that you need scratched that is dark and sweaty and
that's gross. That's gross. But yes,
an apt metaphor, an apt comparison.
But yeah, that was our encounter with the Kraken. I learned a few things, because this is probably the first Kraken I've ever bumped into in either Pathfinder or 5e. I didn't even realize they were intelligent until...
Oh, really?
No, I had no idea. I just assumed it was a really, really, really big giant squid and that was going to try to break a ship in half. It turns out this thing's negotiating with us.
And you gotta love Forgotten Realms naming conventions for big scary creatures, because it's not just not just krakens. Dragons have a lot of ridiculous names too. But and I said the name of the kraken, and Dan just lost it.
Yeah, he did. That was a good 3 or 4 minutes of solid laughter.
The name of the kraken is Herkragmaloop.
Yep.
But I looked up notable krakens in 5th edition Forgotten Realms.
And they've all got ridiculous names.
Most of them have silly names. So I was like, I'll just follow this example.
We'll just give it a silly name. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
But Dan. He laughs at a lot of things. So
he does, which we love him the more for it. All right, so that's what we have done. Oh, I guess I should talk about... For our Norse fantasy thing, we talked in the previous episode that I had finished the bare bones of the cooking system, and now I'm talking about, I haven't put it to paper yet, but working on the brewing system for magical meats and potions.
Yeah, our alchemy, we've decided to lean very heavily into the concept of brewing.
I don't remember, honestly, did you have that idea before or after Valheim came out?
I don't even think I had an idea for a crafting system before Valheim came out. So
Okay, so it might be heavily inspired
I
by
I
Valheim.
might have been inspired by it, but it may have also been inspired by the fact that I have learned to make mead because of the
That's
study.
true, you have.
Because I mean, as a part
I'll
of
give you that one.
this project, obviously we've done a lot of studying of Norse mythology and Norse culture during that time.
And yeasts.
And for anybody that's listening that's a big purist on Norse culture, we have taken a lot of liberties with the game. It is a fantasy game based on Norse mythology, not a historic retelling of Norse anything. So
Correct.
don't come into it with the expectation
It is literally an alternate mythology.
yeah, don't come into it with the expectation that all of the iconography and lore is going to be spot on with the sagas, although I have been through the sagas several times.
We're worried more about the thematics than the technical writing.
That's basically it. We want it to be a fun game that is centered around, the Norse pantheon and the kind of magic that they talked about in the sagas and stuff like that. But we are not doing this is not a historical take. So
Speaking of brewing, what are we drinking today?
we have it's called Shot Tower. It is from Potosi Brewing in Wisconsin. It is
Potosi Brewing's Shot Tower Espresso
it's an
Stout.
espresso stout.
Another, whoa, look, Cody and Lance are drinking another stout. Wow.
Listen, here's the thing, okay? I went to the store to get beer, and it's the time of year, apparently. I think because spring is, we're almost
Spring
to summer.
has sprung.
Spring has sprung. I think they're just trying to get rid of all the stouts that they have there because it's like front and center in all the shelves.
Soon it will be the time of the sour.
Yeah, and I, being a big fan of dark beers, have a hard time resisting good stouts when I get there. So when I'm looking at it, I'm like,
Ooh,
that
piece of
sounds,
candy.
yeah, that sounds
Ooh,
delicious.
piece of candy.
Piece of candy, So I would imagine as we get into summer, I'll probably be drinking something a little lighter. But this was what was there, and this is what appealed to me, and I like it. So if you don't, I don't care.
You're just
Gonna have to deal with it.
all right. Well, today's main topic we're going to talk about is a little bit of time travel, but not in. Well, we may or may not talk about time travel in your game, or we can make a whole episode about that. But for starters, we have a question from a listener/player in one of our games. So we've got the question. Well, here I'll just read the email from one of my players that has been in my games since I first started running games in Deadlands, which is kind of interesting because he was there for the first time that I ran a game, and it's relevant to his statement. So he says, this is from our buddy Jared. He says, if you could go back in time and tell your brand new table-topping self one thing, or give him one piece of advice, what would it be? Keep up the great work. Signed, the Blue Rose Winery, which I think is just a little bit of flavor, unless Moose is holding out on us and he's starting a winery.
I mean, if he
Which
is,
I'd be,
if he is, you should let me know. I mean, we could swap brewing techniques since I know how to make mead and beer now.
Yeah, but, so that's the question. If you could go back, which for me is a mere half a decade. Only 5 years ago did I start game mastering, but for you, Lance, this is a lot longer of a time. When was the year? Can you remember which year exactly you started running games? For a second.
I think it was 2000, or no, sorry, I think it was 1995.
1995. I was
My
four.
freshman year in high school, so I think it was 95.
I was 4 for most of that year, just to put this into perspective. Turned 5 in the fall. And you started with what game?
Shadowrun was the first game.
Shadowrun was
Yep.
before Deadlands.
Shadowrun 2nd edition.
So if you could go back in time to give yourself one piece of advice or tell yourself one thing and we'll probably talk about more than one thing, but what do you think is the most important thing that you would go back and tell yourself?
Don't get married after you get back from Iraq.
Oh, okay. No, sorry, let me clarify. What's the most important piece of tabletop gaming?
Wow, this is kind of a question that
that's funny.
I think I'd have to bifurcate it into what I would give myself for advice
use of that word.
as a player, and what I would give myself as advice as a game master, because
I guess that's true because your tabletoping self started before game mastering, right?
Yeah. I mean, my buddy.
This is the Game Master Speakeasy, but players are also welcome.
My buddy Jason was the one that introduced me to Shadowrun, and he did most of the GMing for quite a while. at least for the first couple of years that I was playing before I really dug into it. So I guess we'll start with that since we're running all the way back to freshman year Lance and him learning the tabletops.
Lance with hair.
Yeah, Lance with hair. I don't have any of that anymore. I think that the thing that I would tell myself if I could go back would be to focus more on your character's personality and backstory than their stats. When I first started in the tabletop thing, I was a bit of a munchkin. Like, it was all.
And that kind of seems to be like an age. I'm not trying to be ageist, but it is kind of like a younger player thing.
Yeah,
right?
you start out and I'm like, I just want to blow things up. How can I roll as many dice as possible and blow things up? So I made
it's around at this time that you would spend all night playing Final Fantasy. Right?
Yeah.
So you're worried about character strength and stats and things like that.
That's exactly that. So for that, I mean, like, I would make characters that were just literal psychopaths. And well, I think in the world of Shadowrun, to do what a Shadowrunner does, you got to be a little bit mentally unhinged. When I say psychopaths, I mean these guys were characters that would never have been hired by any Johnson at all whatsoever to do anything. I mean, other than maybe like really nasty wet work, like, I need you to go and kill all of the gang members in this building, unceremoniously maybe. But I mean, any kind of level of corporate espionage, these characters weren't appropriate for it.
Right.
But again, I was young, and to me, I was just playing a video game on paper. Mm-hmm. You know, the role ROLE playing part of this was not as high a priority because I didn't really understand it. So I would just tell myself to go back and really method act the characters better. You know what I mean? Like, build a character that you can role play, and that stuff comes with time. I mean, I would imagine, my kid's 13, he turns 14 this year. I would imagine any tabletop playing he's doing is probably very similar to what I was when I started, where it was like, I'm going to make a barbarian and I'm going to just bash goblin skulls in for fun, without thinking too hard about it. But I mean, here's the thing: if you're young and that's what gets you into the hobby, great.
It's the beer and pretzel style of game.
You will eventually probably grow out of that and move on. If I could go back and give myself any GMing advice, I mean, there's a lot on this list, but I'm trying to pick my favorite before I turn it over to Cody to hear what he's got to say.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think the thing that I would probably give myself for advice would be to have more control over my table. I'm a big proponent these days of making sure that as a GM that you're heavily involved in your player's character creation process to make sure that their characters fit into your setting. And so that the session zero, I need everybody to understand what kind of campaign we're running.
Yeah.
When I first started, it was a free-for-all. Make whatever kind of wacky clown character that you can come up with.
Show up Friday night with whatever you want.
Yeah, just show up and we'll figure it out. Well, what we ended up with was a lot of in-game character conflicts, especially in Shadowrun, because in Shadowrun, you're kind of playing the A-team. Your goal is to have this group of professional, or at least semi-professional, agents, these assets that can be hired by corporations to go screw with other corporations. You know, so if everybody comes in with a free-for-all, you end up with some dude that's playing a character that's basically the Joker from Batman. You're like, you don't really have any good espionage skills, you're not doing anything, and you're just going to start executing hostages at the first opportunity. You know, and then you have somebody else in the party who's building a professional mercenary, and the first thing they want to do is plug Joker in the back of the head, because he's more of a liability than an asset to the group. So I think we had a lot of weird character interactions that come from me not having proper control over my games.
Okay. And I think that's probably a good piece of advice to any newcomers, is to take an active hand. Because, especially if you're worried about the tone of your game, right? Mm-hmm. If you're trying to run a grimdark setting and someone comes in with a happy-go-lucky sprite cleric of the trickster god.
Yeah, ever the optimist character.
Oh yeah, then it's gonna break
immersion a little bit.
Maybe, yeah.
It might end up being a negative for the rest of the party, who may have bought into the grimdark setting and really wanted to live that.
Yeah, as an example. Mm-hmm. I would say that is that's a good thing to take notice of, is what your players are going to be interested in for their character creation, and it might help to. Something I read the other day, which makes perfect sense when it's one of those things that you come across, and it's something that you know, but someone phrased it better than you ever thought of it. And it was, rather than telling your players what's not allowed at your table, tell them what is allowed at your table.
Yeah.
Start with, hey, we're playing in this setting. These are the options that are available to you. So that way they don't come and say, oh, hey, is Inventor available? And you're playing a really low tech kind of setting, fantasy setting, and you don't want an artificer with their all sorts of mechanical magic
This
bullcrap.
dude's got a laser gun. Why?
Yeah,
It's not for the one. And as a broke teenager, it's not like I had too many options outside of Shadowrun, because it's not like I could afford to go buy a bunch of books.
Well, and you got your books hand me down too, didn't you?
Yeah, well,
it was like a
Jason bought most of the books. I think all of us kind of chipped in a little bit.
Yeah.
And then when he stopped game mastering, he just handed me a box, and he said, "Here, just take it. I'm not going to use it anymore."
Yeah, it was.
So,
it was just
I've still got a
passing of the torch.
Yeah, I've still got a handful of, like, original Shadowrun, a couple of the first edition books, most of the second edition books, third edition books. I mean, I've got a ton of them. But I think in a scenario, like, assuming that you are an adult with some financial means listening to this, I think another good piece of advice that you could take from this is, don't be afraid to change settings if that's what your players want.
Oh, yeah.
And what I mean by that is, if you've got a group of people that are really, really into fantasy, and the only book you've got at home is Shadowrun. Shadowrun does have some fantasy elements to it, admittedly, but I mean, if they're looking for something, more like what 5th edition...
But also, at the same time, it takes place in future Seattle.
Yeah, no, that's... what I mean is, there's magic, there's orcs, there's elves, there's trolls, there's dwarves. There's also cyberware and VTOLs and, stuff like that, cyberware. So, I mean, it has fantasy elements, but it is in no way a fantasy setting. So if you have, players that are looking for a certain thing out of their game, focus on that. Like, if that means that you have to change settings from the game that you have at home to buying something new, there's nothing wrong with that. Because if their characters are all kind of like, let's say you've got some dude that wants to play a member of a knightly order, and he's trying to shoehorn that idea into a Shadowrun game, it's gonna be hard.
It's gonna be hard.
Not impossible, but it's gonna be hard.
That's one of those situations for me where I think it becomes a source of inspiration for trying to find out why. Why is this knightly order existing? And rather than saying, okay, this is one of those situations where you as a game master can say, okay, but. Try and keep justice afloat in the world. So it's kind of, you've got the scenario where you can take your characters. Well, I mean, we're hearkening back to your involvement. What you would tell your young self. Take control of character creation and how your game runs.
You've got to get your characters at that point to buy into, okay, I'm willing to put together kind of a knightly order for you, but you have to make sure that this is going to fit into modern parlance.
Right.
Like the Kingsmen, for example. They don't wear big metal armor and swing swords. They all have guns and gadgets.
They have bespoke suits.
Yeah.
That is their suit of armor.
Exactly. That's their thing. So, I mean, if you can get the player to say, okay, well, I like the concept that you're coming up with, but in order for it to work in this particular universe...
Certain concessions.
Certain concessions. I mean, I did the same thing. One of my earlier characters in Deadlands was a Catholic abomination hunter from an order that I just made up.
Yeah.
And that was kind of that same shtick. But, and while he did have a sword, he also had a pair of guns, and you know what I mean? Like, because I had to fit him into the Old West. So, I mean, that's a very similar concept. So, yeah, but you can do something like that. You have to make sure everybody's on board, because I'm not going to run a Shadowrun campaign where some dude's running medieval armor with a broadsword.
No, that'd be...
I'm not doing it. It's
running through the streets of Seattle in plate mail.
That's not happening.
That's going to draw some attention.
It's going to take everybody else out of the game. As a game master, it's just hard to deal with.
I'm going to call out Taco right now.
Okay.
The Shadowrun character Taco, who was what was he, an ogre or an orc?
Orc probably, orc or troll.
No, troll. That's what I'm trying to think of. He was the troll character who just really did not belong as a Shadowrunner, just because of his attitude and style.
Yeah.
You could have made, that would have been a scenario where a person might say, okay, but we need to change how this character works a little bit, because I, as a player, felt like that character was a little disruptive to the gameplay, which, don't get me wrong, I think that's one of the things that I don't know if it's the most important thing that I would tell myself, but whether I'm a player or a game master, I think one of the things that I would tell myself is, hey, you're going to make some mistakes.
Yeah.
That's what I would go back and tell myself is, you're going to make some mistakes.
Just to give yourself fair warning that no matter how perfect you think it's going to be, it's never going to be that perfect.
Yep. So I'm going to do what you did. I'm going to break it up into my player advice and my GM advice. And honestly, as a player, I felt like I did pretty well. I was already in my mid-20s. Right? I was not coming out of a video game teenager mindset. Not that all teenagers are going to be munchkins, but
it's easier at that age to justify doing that.
Based on personal experience of reading anecdotes online, that seems to be the case and the trend. That
Just
the younger players...
Statistically more common.
Yeah, statistically more common. That's all. Not a generalization saying that all teenagers are going to be like that, but I think especially with the popularity of Critical Role, more people up front will realize the value of role-playing.
Yeah.
It's a different age now than it was 15 years ago.
I was going to say, that was, when I was doing it, these things still hadn't reached that, like, media critical mass that they have today. I mean, it was not a popular hobby. It was very, very few people that I knew that were into it.
Right?
Yeah.
Because in the, there was no D&D cartoon airing at the time that you were starting, but there was one before your time.
Yeah.
But then you had entered the bottom part of the valley in tabletop kind of popularity. There was a resurgence, I think, ever since 3.5's popularity. We've been building up. Then there was, of course, the 4th edition, which then became Pathfinder. But I feel like, as someone who was not involved at the time, I don't know what the sales data shows, but as someone who has been cognizant of tabletop role-playing games' existence from a young age, it feels like since 3.5 D&D has come out that we have been climbing the mountain towards the peak that is currently 5th edition's
I think just
state.
Like acceptance of the hobbies.
Yeah, exactly.
Too.
Oh,
like,
for sure. Now it's cool to be a nerd.
Yeah,
in general, compared to the 90s and earlier,
for sure.
it is now chic to be a nerd.
I was a nerd before it was cool.
Oh, gosh. However, so my advice to my young player self has little to do with mechanics or role-playing. I would tell myself, you don't need so many sets of dice.
I was going to say, maybe you tell yourself to take a higher vigor score.
That's my second point. I don't need so many sets of dice, and don't dump my vigor score. Those are the two pieces. But here's the thing: that is one of my more memorable experiences. I played to my character's flaw. The dice were not pleasant to me.
No, we're not.
It was. So I'm sorry. What?
I said no, they were not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they were not pleasant to me.
Beat you up that night.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't have a lot of advice for my player self. When I would almost just tell myself, get into running a game sooner. Would be my piece of it, because I took to it, right?
So you're basically, your advice to your player self is just start GMing now.
Yeah, just start GMing now.
Okay, that's fair.
Just don't wait 3 years before you get interested in it. Run a game now.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of the thing. Like I feel like my identity is more of a game master than a player now.
You'd have 3 years more experience and stuff like that if you could go back and...
Suffice to say, maybe my time as a player helped build my empathy towards players. So maybe that was a good thing. Who knows? But I have more impactful advice to, right before I start game mastering, I would go back in time and tell myself, don't sweat it. Which, now... I completely understand. You can't just tell a person that has anxiety, hey, don't have anxiety, right? But still, I would go back and say, hey, what if you were actually good at this? Like give myself a what if statement. Like, hey, what if this is something that you have a knack for? To try and get my earlier self into the mindset of not stressing too much about the upcoming session. And it's something that I have gotten better at. I still feel it from time to time, and I know that anyone who is here that has and is and will game master, you feel the pressure, probably, of the upcoming session. And you feel like it might become a job, right? That is something that you run the risk of when you're doing anything on a regular basis that has responsibility attached to it. If you don't do anything to prep for your next game session, you're going to have to improv everything. Which, if you are a better improving game master, more power to you. But I think that a lot of my sessions where I have come away and the players said, "Wow, that was an amazing session, Cody," they're usually the ones that I kind of threw caution to the wind and did not stress over the prep as much. I still did some prep, but I didn't worry about it as hard, and I didn't prep a whole lot. I prepped just enough of a skeleton to wrap the meat of the session around. I think that it's something that I need to pay more attention to, is that the more free form, because we run a more open-ended campaign. We don't run adventures. I've tried to run Storm King's Thunder once, and I was not very good at running a pre-written adventure. Having done it now, I think I could do it better in the future by taking more control of character creation and roping it into the existing story. But I would tell myself, try not to sweat it so much. You're gonna do good at this, and I would tell myself, hey, I've been doing it now for 5 years. People are still showing up to your game, is what I would tell my younger self.
Well, I can't speak to, like, I know that we've reached an era where the internet has allowed a lot of people to game online, which has caused a lot of people to game with complete strangers, sometimes for pay, you know. And so I don't know that I can attest too much to that, but if you're with a group of friends playing tabletops, they're just happy you're GMing.
Yeah,
you are far more worried about the quality of product that you're putting out than they are. They are there as that's poker night. You know what I mean? Like, for those of us that don't play poker, that's when you get together with your friends, you get to BS, you get to laugh, and you all get to enjoy this tabletop game, which is just your poker night. It's the thing that you like to do when you get together with your friends. They're happy to be there, and they're happy to have somebody who's willing to put in the effort to GM, because most people that are playing the game because they don't want to GM.
There's actually a podcast called Nerd Poker, which is a actual play of Dungeons and Dragons, where the GM is Brian Posehn, the comedian.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's very funny that you should bring up poker night.
But yeah, I mean, that's what it is. So, you know, you're probably, in most cases, I've experienced it, Cody obviously has because he's talking about it.
Yeah.
You're going to be your own biggest critic as
Yes.
a GM. You are going to be sitting here fretting about these little decisions that you're making and stressing and building up all this anxiety. And here's the reality. Your players don't really care.
Yeah.
They are there. They're already having a good time. They keep showing up because they're having a good time. And they're just grateful that somebody is willing to do the heavy lifting that is GM.
Oh, yeah. And that advice does not apply to people that are putting their games online as an actual play podcast. The random people on the internet are going to be your biggest critic. But the people that are running those games don't need our advice.
Like the internet gaming thing aside.
Yeah, internet gaming aside.
If you're one of those people that's GMing for a group of your friends or coworkers, you get together once or twice a month or once a week or whatever, and you sit down in a room with other human beings rolling dice and playing these games,
and you're boosted.
You are more worried about it than they are. That's just a fact. I promise you that Cody spends more time worrying about what I think of his game session than I'm spending worrying about what I think of his game session.
That's very true, and that's one thing that I would try and put into the head of my younger self. Don't get me wrong. Yes, I say that a lot. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong.
I'm going to get you wrong.
I empathize with those who have these anxieties. And if you have anxiety, you can't just wave a hand and have it go away. But you can take active steps to manage this anxiety. Try and do the fake it till you make it thing. That actually works sometimes. If you wake up and look in the mirror and say, I am a more than competent GM, or I am a great GM, I can put together a storyline, eventually you will probably start to believe it.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, if your players aren't, constantly volunteering to take over the GM duties, that probably means you're doing a good job.
Yeah. If I had a second piece of advice to give myself, it would be don't get lazy with names.
Yeah.
I know as a game master, and I'm still doing it, that if you haven't named an NPC, you should have a list of names ready, rather than trying to think of one on the fly.
Names are so hard. They're so hard because you bump into so many irrelevant characters that your players will find a way to accidentally make relevant.
Yeah.
You'll always have the one or two people in your group that want to role play with everybody.
With absolutely
every single, like they can't just walk into a store.
But that's their fun.
No, it is. I'm not dogging their fun, but like they can't just walk into a general store and say, "Hey, I want to buy this. How much is it?"
Yeah.
And walk out without ever knowing.
Hey, what's your name?
Yeah.
How many kids do you have? What charities are you involved with?
They can't.
Do you know the Red Dragon?
Yeah, they can't walk in and out without knowing the ancestry of the guy behind the counter, whether it's a guy or a girl, like an adequate description. They want to hear the voice of the character. And like they want to talk about that character's life. And as a GM, you can't
shirk it.
Well,
you can't skimp on that.
One, you can't shirk it, and two, you can't pre-prep for all of it.
No.
There's no way. I mean, even if they are in a small village of several hundred people, are you going to pre-gen several hundred NPCs?
No.
You
don't. The important ones.
You don't have that kind of time, which means maybe you help yourself out by having a list of random names where you can just be like, "Oh, you want to know this NPC's name? Close your eyes, touch the spot on your sheet where you've got the name.
Yeah.
That's the character's name. You're done. Write it down because they're going to bring it up later, but make sure you annotate it."
Don't actually do that on the spot, but because you want to keep the illusion that this person had the name. Don't close your eyes and point.
Don't show your players.
Yeah, don't show your players that you did
But I mean,
that.
if you got your laptop in front of you, just
theoretically.
scroll down and like, all right, that's the name we're taking.
Because it really reinforces the illusion that the world is real when the players ask and the person just says their name.
Yeah.
It's a very small but impactful thing
Makes
that
the world feel alive.
I occasionally do get lazy about it. And I still to this day get lazy about it, and I am a little ashamed of it, but I would go back in time and tell myself, "Hey, don't get lazy with the names."
You're better at it than I am. Half the time when I start my session, I gotta ask you guys what the NPCs' names were from last session.
Hey, yeah, what was his name?
What was the king's name again?
You meet the Fisher. His name is Guy Manfredson. But yeah, that's. Do you have any other last pieces of advice that you would go back in time to tell yourself? You've so far taken control of character creation. I know right now, this is something that Moose does. Like we've talked about it before, that I'm inspired, and it's actually one of the concepts of Dungeon World, where you let the mechanics of a game be informed by the narrative. So, for instance, if like one of the characters absolutely destroys the captain of a group, there's no mechanic baked into the system that says, "Oh, now all of the enemies are feared of you," right? But if you go through the trouble of saying, "Oh, everyone cowers back and is intimidated by your action," give all the enemies feared, right? That's something that some people are more free-flowing with the rules, to use the rules to reinforce the narrative. And I have had a problem with this, but I have observed that when it happens, people have more fun.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think if I had another piece of advice to give myself, it would be to stop over-preparing.
Yeah.
I am the kind of guy that when I get an idea for a campaign in my head, and I don't do it anymore, but I used to do it real bad, I would go through and try to outline, like, at least, like, the bare bones of the entire campaign front to back. And then I would also prepare several sessions in advance. No, don't do that.
No.
Please do not do that to yourself. Just trust me. Your players will derail everything you plan.
Yeah, plan about one session.
Plan, yeah, one session ahead is all the further you need to plan because, I mean, Pathfinder, we had to kind of stop early at the last session because you hadn't anticipated my plan to get because our group knows a number of very powerful casters.
As you should at level 16.
As we should at level 16. But I mean, there's this literal organization of wizards. And Cody hadn't anticipated my plan to, well, if we're looking for a very powerful ritual to decurse an artifact, let's go there first.
Yeah.
Like, that was my plan. And so, I pitched that idea, and I told the Kraken, I was like, well, I'll give you a chance to go get you this thing that you need. And then I'll come back, and then you can leave, and you can give me the key, and everybody's happy. And then, we got out of that section of the city, and I was like, okay, we need to go back and talk to Varala, which is our favorite Lich Queen, who is a member.
Everyone should have a favorite Lich Queen.
Who is a member of this organization of wizards, and we're going to figure out if any of these wizards, which one of our wizard is actually a member of this group, knows this ritual for us, because, well, that's probably the greatest set of contacts we would have for something in this context. Cody didn't apparently think that I was going to think of that, so...
No, I had not planned for it. I couldn't remember that NPC's name off the top of my head. I don't remember where I stored that information, so I called the session about 20 minutes early.
I was going to say, so we left 20, 30 minutes before we would have normally left the session, because Cody's like, well, I got to go prepare for this, figure out how we're going to resolve it, which is... That's okay as a GM, too. Don't be afraid to call the session, because you might not have planned for what the players had, and if they had a really good idea, they're going to be more satisfied with the campaign if you quit a session early to give credence to the plan that they had.
No gaming is better than bad gaming.
Yeah, exactly. I would rather quit a half an hour early and then have the next session be like, okay, I took your plan into consideration, we've accounted for it, here's how we're going to run through it, than for a game master to say railroad you because they had a plan for how they thought you were going to do it. And instead of taking into consideration your plan, they're just kind of gently poking you with a stick to get you back in the direction they want you to begin with.
Yep. So in summation, for player advice, we've got don't be a munchkin.
Yeah,
try to lead more into the ROLE playing.
Yep.
You don't need as many dice. I would say I
have literal pounds of dice at home.
I would go back and tell myself, hey, you're doing a good job reading the rules. So read the rules. Read through the rules of your class and the game's mechanics. For game masters, take more control of character creation. Mm-hmm. Don't sweat it. Try and have a little more confidence. And don't get lazy with names. And what was that last thing you just said? It was about the.
Don't plan too far ahead.
Don't over prep.
Don't plan too far ahead.
Don't plan too far ahead because you don't know what kind of crazy things will happen with your players.
You have to remember, the players are a part of the design of the story.
It is a cooperative narrative experience.
If you plan the whole thing out and you don't give them the opportunity to ruin your plan,
go write a novel.
You're doing it wrong. Yeah, go write a book.
Go write a book. All right, so we have been Cody and Lance. Of the Game Master Speakeasy. We hope you have enjoyed your time here being served by Anya. If you have gotten one of these delicious espresso stouts, I hope you agree. After having finished the can, I would say that it is very smooth. I like the classic coffee mocha taste to it. It's very smooth. I'm very appreciative of you bringing it today. Thank you.
I know what I'm about.
If you would like to hear more of the Game Master Speakeasy, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. If you would like to tweet at us, you can find the Record Button production group on Twitter. We are also, our producers are on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. These videos are uploaded on the Record Button production group YouTube channel. If you would like to message Lance and I specifically with questions, comments, topics, concerns, just want to give us positive feedback, negative feedback, hopefully positive feedback, whatever, gmspeakeasyofficial@gmail.com. Once again, our Gmail account is gmspeakeasyofficial@gmail.com, where you can send us questions like the one we answered today. Thank you again, Moose. Thank you for being a player in my group. Thank you for sending us a question. We hope to hear from other listeners soon. In regards to that, do you have any final thoughts, Lance?
Just get home safe.
Get home safe. See ya!